Okay, so today we're going to do a meta tier list for all the agents. This will be focusing on pro play, but it is this channel, so what did you expect? First of all, let's take a look at the categories that we're going to be putting the agents into. So we got nerf worthy at the top. This doesn't necessarily mean that you do need a nerf, just that, you would definitely consider giving the agent a nerf. Good pick and decent are kind of, where you want the agents to be. Niche is like, you maybe could use a little bit of a buff, and then don't play is you probably need like a full rework or significant buffs. Okay, so let's dive into it, and our first agent is ISO, and this one's going to be very simple. Don't play ISO. Next up, though, we have Jet, which is a bit more of a tricky one to place because Jet still has a pretty high pick rate overall and does see quite a bit of play across a variety of maps. However, I've never been the biggest Jet fan. Personally, for me, what the Jet's pick rate comes down to is that there are still a lot of pro players out there who have mastered Jet, and their Jet is very, very good. And they haven't maybe mastered that many other agents. And so their Jet for their team is better than playing something that they're not as comfortable with. And so they play Jet. But that doesn't necessarily mean that Jet is the correct option. It just means that they were abusing Jet when Jet was OP. And, have just stuck with the agent that they know how to play. So I'm going to put Jet in the decent tier for me. Because, again, on certain maps, I still think you should pick Jet, but I think there's still quite a few instances of where people are picking Jet that I think that they don't actually find that much value from. Okay, Neon. Neon is like the definition of a niche agent. Obviously, we've seen teams like Team Heretics use Neon pretty well, but of course, Neon's not going to take over the meta or anything like that. It's a niche agent. Phoenix. Now, you could say the same thing is true for Loud with Phoenix as well. That, hey, we've seen quite a bit of Phoenix, so Phoenix must be a niche agent as well. Well, no. I think that Phoenix is a don't play agent. Now, better than ISO, but I don't think that you should play Phoenix because I think whether it's Yoru or whether it's KO, whichever kind of side of the coin that you want there, those two agents are just better versions of Phoenix, and you would just be better off playing either of those agents, depending on how you're using Phoenix. You'd just be better off not playing Phoenix and playing the other versions. Okay, Raze. Raze, I'm going to put in the nerf-worthy category. Obviously, Raze's pick rate has been very high, but I think that Raze has, in particular, kind of a couple things that separates Raze from the rest of the duelist class, and I think it's arguably the two most important things that an agent can have, which is stopping power and information, right? So Raze has the ability, or better ability, I would say, than pretty much all of the other duelists in terms of stopping power. If you have a well-timed nade placed down, it's going to stop people from coming in, or it's going to kill them, basically, which is very, very good. And obviously, with the boom bot, you get information, and that's something that pretty much no other duelist has access to. You could argue the Yoru clone slightly, but, pretty much there is nothing like a boom bot for any other duelist agent, and information is just good. And I think that those things combined with, obviously, like, the many different uses for a blast pack and whatnot, just make Raze very, very strong and nerf-worthy. Okay, for Raina, obviously, this is about pro play, so I'm going to, again, put Raina in the don't play. You might think that Raina should be in the niche, perhaps. Some of you could make that argument, but again, I would say that anytime someone picks Raina, there probably is a better option available for me. And then for Yoru, it's kind of the opposite coin of Jet, I think, almost, where I think that Yoru has a lot of potential, but we maybe haven't quite seen Yoru play to a max, or there isn't that many people who have mastered Yoru necessarily, so you still do see some very clunky Yoru performances. We even saw it from Gen G with Meteor at Masters Madrid. So I think that Yoru is a good pick. I think that Yoru is a strong agent, but there are still perhaps some potential issues with people. He's a very complex agent as well and needs a lot of time to work, but I think if you can get him to work, he is a very good pick. Okay, moving on to the initiators, and I might surprise some of you here by putting Breach more lower than you might expect, but I'm going to put him at the bottom of niche. And you might be like, what the hell are you doing putting him that low? Because a lot of people, I think, probably think Breach is a decent agent. But for me, Breach has been the lowest win rate agent for the past 2 years when I've been keeping track of the stats, and he started off this year doing pretty bad as well. And at a certain point, I just have to accept that maybe Breach is an overrated agent. The thing is that I will throw Breach a bit of a bone, is that oftentimes you'll see Breach go up against Viper, right? In terms of when we're choosing a comp, if we want to go double Initiator, we'll go Breach plus something. But if we want to go double Controller, that will be Viper, who kind of takes that Breach's spot. So often those two agents are competing, and Viper is completely broken, so Breach ends up looking very bad in comparison. However, this is a meta tier list, and so if you are in a meta where you don't synergize with it that well, like Breach doesn't really with double Controller necessarily, and you end up suffering because of that, I'm sorry, but then yeah, people shouldn't be picking you that much if the thing that's meta counters you pretty hard and is much better than you. Okay, Fade, and this is just a bit of a general consideration of mine, that recon initiators and being able to reveal people and where they are is pretty good. Gecko will be following suit as well, I think. Again, just kind of another one of my general principles, that refreshable utility is pretty good, and Gecko is kind of the benefactory of that, and obviously does that better than anyone else. And I think that we're starting to see people really pick up Gecko and learn how to actually play this agent pretty well, and they're finding a lot of success if you can play this agent pretty well. So I'm going to put Gecko pretty high right now, because I do think that Gecko is in a really good spot, and if you have a good Gecko, you'll probably be doing pretty well right now. Heyo as well. I mean, in general, initiators tend to be pretty good. They tend to have better utility than most other classes, and it refreshes. So yeah, initiators just tend to be pretty good, and I think Heyo is pretty good right now as well. Where exactly does he go in the good pick? I don't know. Maybe I'll just put him slightly below Fade, but still a good pick. However, when it comes to Sky, of course, I just said refreshable utility, pretty good. Sky now doesn't have that. And so I'm going to put Sky in the niche bucket. Not that you can't find success with Sky still, but I do think that Gecko is just better. Basically, it's the inverse of what happened last year, right? With last year, Sky was just better version of Gecko. Right now, I'm kind of on the train of just Gecko is better version of Sky. I feel like Sky, because of that lack of refreshable utility, you either need to be very, very aware of what you're doing and have a playstyle that I don't think most pros have adapted well to yet with Sky, or you need to play a very aggressive style, and it kind of, is forcing you into that kind of style if you want to. Not that necessarily that's always a bad thing, but that's why Sky, I think, is probably a bit more of a niche agent. Okay, Sova, same kind of thing as Fade, being revealed, pretty good. Yeah, I'm going to put Sova. Is Sova better than Fade? God, I mean, we are kind of in a bit of a Cipher meta, so maybe right now Silver is slightly better than Fade, but it's pretty close. Okay, Chamber. Onto the Sentinels. Chamber is the definition of niche. I don't think anyone would really disagree. If you can get good value from the teleport, obviously good for you. But if not, then Chamber probably isn't that good of a pick. Okay, Cipher. And I think, again, this one's pretty easy for Cipher. I think Cipher is a pretty bona fide good pick right now across a variety of maps. Cipher's going to be just pretty good. And again, I don't think that's in ranked and in pro play. I think that's going to be pretty true. Okay, now let's do Killjoy. And I think that with the current map pool and where we are, I'm going to put Killjoy at the top of decent. You definitely could make an argument for good pick, but I do think that Cipher might just be ever so slightly better. But I also want to do in Deadlock and Sage together, because for Deadlock and Sage, this, again, might be a bit controversial, but I'm going to put them in the don't play. Now, the reason that I'm going to put both these agents in the don't play is because, again, I feel like there are just better options than this type of agent, right? Than the Barrier Sentinels. I know that my friend Elevated will very much disagree because he's a big Deadlock fan, but for me, there are just better things to play. You'd just be better off a lot of the time playing something else, because the thing is with Barrier Sentinels, right? Their main bit of utility, the Barrier, can be countered in two ways. Either you can just wait for it to go down and use time as a resource, or you can use bullets as a resource and destroy them. And the thing is, either way, bullets or time are not resources that particularly matter that often, right? How often do you actually run out of bullets? Not very often. How often do you completely run out of time? Also not very often, right? So basically that just limits, I think, the impact of these agents to the way that you counter the main kind of part of their kit a lot of the time is through resources that don't matter that much. So I'm going to put them in don't play. And then finally, the controllers. And, well, here's the thing. The controller class is an interesting one right now. We'll start with Astra. And here's the weird thing. I think that the controller class right now is in a state where I'm going to put Astra in the niche bucket. Now, the map pool, like Pearl, Astra is generally seen as maybe a bit better on Pearl. So maybe if the map pool was a little different, we would see a bit more Astra. But right now, we aren't seeing that much Astra, and I do think that, Omen, we'll get to Omen, is just a better pick a lot of the time. So I'm going to put Astra in niche as well, and I'm going to put Astra alongside Brim here in the niche bucket. Obviously, Brim does have Bind as a map where you're going to play Brim pretty much all the time, or at least a lot of the time, and he's good on Bind. And yeah, that's cool, but again, that's still pretty niche. But then we come to CLOVE. Where am I going to put CLOVE on this list? Well, if you watched my video before, you'll know I'm not the biggest fan of CLOVE. I do think CLOVE is better than Don't Play. I don't think CLOVE is that bad. I think CLOVE is a niche agent. I'm going to put CLOVE probably a bit further down, but still in the niche bucket overall. Again, the smokes after death thing I think is cool. I think it's a cool design in general for that. But the rest of the kit I just find a bit lacking, right? The pick-me-up and the metal, I just don't think are good enough to warrant picking CLOVE. If those abilities were better abilities, then I would, probably be moving CLOVE quite a bit higher in the list. But I just think that those two abilities are pretty underwhelming, and that's, that's half your kit that is pretty underwhelming. And so I'm going to put CLOVE in the niche. Okay, Harbor. Now, again, this is my tier list. You can disagree with it. I'm a Harbor fan, and I think that Harbor, again, suffers the same kind of fate as Yoru a bit in the kind of need to be a bit creative with Harbor, I think, to find good value. I don't think Harbor is the easiest agent to play either. So there just isn't a ton necessarily of good Harbors out there. And there just isn't many people who put a lot of time into Harbor. But I think if you watch, Tui sometimes when he plays Harbor, gets a lot of value from it, right? And I do think that Harbor probably is underrated right now. So I'm going to put Harbor not too much higher, but just into the decent. And then we come to Omen and Viper. And Omen and Viper, I mean, we don't need to waste any time here. They're going at the top of the list for good reason. Now, here's the thing. With Omen, and this is why it's nerf worthy, and we'll come to this, right? With Viper, Viper needs a nerf. Okay, Viper needs a nerf. Full stop. There we go. When it comes to Omen, and maybe you could even argue this for Raze as well, that in reality, it's not that they are too good, but it's that the rest of their class maybe isn't good enough. Right? Like, I think that the controller class, you could balance it a lot better by just giving small buffs to basically, your Brims, your Astras, your Cloves, your Harbors even, right? Like, just with sort of small buffs to all those agents, we could end up with a more competitive control class, and Omen's pick rate wouldn't be so high. You could argue the same thing for the duelists as well, right? And I wouldn't necessarily fully disagree with that if you wanted to, buff some of the other duelists, and, Raid's pick rate would maybe come down in a more competitive class. Those are both perfectly fine arguments. When it comes to Viper, Viper basically doesn't have any other competing agents. So that's why Viper needs to be nerfed, because Viper exists in her kind of own class. And that is a problem in and of itself. So yeah, this is kind of where I would say I would rank all of the agents right now with some of my reasonings. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. I know you'll all disagree, but yeah, this is where I see it right now.